What's the difference between sickness and sanity? Do we really know the true meaning of pain? And finally, the most important question, is Stoicism gay? Welcome to Book Boys.
I can answer that last one, I believe. Yes.
World's shortest podcast incoming.
We're reading Anton Chekhov's Word No. 6, published 1892, I believe.
Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, interesting. When I was looking at when this was published, a bunch of stuff came up. Like, it was, I think they originally published it in some magazine format, and then they republished it later, heavily censored though. And then it was like included in his like best, like I forgot the title of it, but it was like the best of Anton Chekhov, and now it's considered to be one of his greatest stories. It's kind of hard to classify as a short story because it's kind of a long short story. You could maybe say it's a novella. But yeah, I guess it's a short story, like about 50-ish pages.
Yeah, I think novella is a fair classification. It took me about, I think, like an hour and a half to read.
Damn, you fast.
Was I?
Yeah. You're always faster than me.
So why Chekhov? I mean, his name comes up a fair bit, so I think anyone that's kind of interested in literature and in like the canon, we know, like, and we've kind of read or at least touched on like a fair few of like the big hitter Russian writers, but we've not really dipped into Chekhov, and he's come up in a lot of like reading on Tarkovsky, the director, recently, and Chekhov comes up a lot in his own writing, which kind of makes sense because Chekhov is also a playwright, and he's the guy that did the whole Chekhov's gun thing, which to anyone that doesn't know is I guess a rule, maybe you could say, or at least a guiding principle that if there's a gun in a play, the gun has to go off at some point. You know, any kind of part of the scenery that has any attention paid to it has to have some relevance to the story.
I think a very famous example, all kind of making fun already of this trope, is in Shaun of the Dead, when they have the pub that's called the Winchester, and they have a Winchester gun literally on the wall, and they kind of hint at it having to play a role later when the zombies come.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Foreshadowing is what we would probably call it, right?
I'm so glad you said that it's this Chekhov that invented, or not, invented, but inspired this Chekhov's gun thing, because there are so many guys named Chekhov, and I was gonna ask, like, is it this guy, or am I stupid?
You actually gave me a bit of a panic then when you said that, and I was like, is it actually the right Chekhov?
Wait, we have because we
it is the right Chekhov.
Oh, it's I was gonna privileged AI search this on the pod, because we live in a privileged world nowadays.
We do,
which is another theme of this story, privilege, and kind of a conflict between, well, in a way it's a kind of attack on Stoicism, maybe not attack, but he makes some good points, and I would really say that this is kind of an existentialist text. I looked up whether Chekhov is usually classified as existentialist, and apparently he isn't. Like it always goes about like Kierkegaard and Sartre and whatever, but I guess for the context of this podcast, we kind of consider Nietzsche and Dostoevsky to be the existentialists, so I think he fits right into that.
Yeah,
and I was actually surprised how completely similar he was to Dostoevsky. Like if you told me this was by Dostoevsky, I would have been like, yeah, checks out.
Yeah, pretty much. It was like a big ordeal choosing one of his texts for this, because there's just so many of them, and if you consult the best of lists, if you like look into what books come up most in, what stories come up most in his like compilation books, like it's all completely different, and there are very few, maybe not very few, there are probably like 10 different books that you see, 10 different stories that continuously come up, and then narrowing down between those is like, for us who are unfamiliar with his work, it's a bit of a ordeal. But yeah, I mean, this one kind of stood out to me as most kind of aligning with what we've been reading, and probably like a good way of kind of penetrating his work. And then, yeah, maybe in the future we can move on to something else. But yeah, I don't think this is necessarily representative of his work as a whole. I'm not even sure if there is like a really real representative work of his.
Yeah, maybe let's start with like a little blurb of like a 1 minute outline of what this is about. So I would say discovering what it is about while you read it is kind of most of the fun. So if you haven't read it, do check it out. It kind of starts out with this description of a hospital, and you're like, okay, so we're talking about a hospital, and then it goes into more specifically into the psych ward, or the little lodge that is the psych ward, and then it starts describing the people in the ward, and you're like, okay, so we're gonna be situated in this hospital ward for the story, I guess. And then it goes into this one specific guy in the hospital called Ivan Dimitrievich, I think. And then it kind of shifts away from that guy to
Gromov.
See, this is the thing. I read a different translation where
okay.
Like, and I looked up about people discussing this story later, and they all were saying names that were not in my version, so I'm confused.
Okay.
This is gonna be, I think maybe you had a guy called Radin or something in your story.
Ragin was the protagonist.
The doctor?
But Ivan Dmitrich Gromov, his surname is supposed to be Gromov, at least.
Oh, wait, I think it did mention that at the beginning, yeah. But the Radin was not mentioned in my version.
Interesting.
I think in my version it was, what is it, Andrei Yamifevich or something?
So yeah, that's his middle name in my book, Andrei Yefimich Ragin.
Okay, he's never referred to as Ragin. Okay, anyway, we'll just say,
interesting,
for the sake of this thing, we'll just refer to him as the doctor. So we'll be talking about this guy,
yes, yeah,
Andrei Yefimevich Ravin, and then we'll refer to Ivan as the smart inpatient, right?
Sure.
Okay, got that. So anyway, so the story starts talking about Ivan and his backstory, how he got there, but then it really switches midway to the doctor, and you're like, okay, are we gonna talk about the doctor for like a little bit and then go back to Ivan? But it turns out that it's mainly about the doctor, and it was really interesting how the flow of the narrative develops, and you even have a scene where they go to Warsaw, and what was the other city they went to? Moscow, I think, right? To St. Petersburg, I think. Must have been St. Petersburg back then. And I know they're different cities. Stop writing.
We don't get any comments anyway.
I know. The voice is in my head. So yeah, I just, first of all, I really like the pacing and this kind of mysterious development of what is actually happening. So I think that was like a very, very good narrative point.
So just to give like a 2-sentence summary of the book, which I think was the original goal of you speaking earlier.
I knew you were going to say this, but I already knew that you were going to say this, so I was like, I'll just leave this a mess and then Nick will clean it up.
So basically, this doctor works in this really rundown, horrifying like hospital out in the sticks, in the middle of nowhere in Russia. He I guess the bones of it is he befriends this intelligent inpatient who we don't know really to what degree he's really insane. Or, it's not super clear whether it's the circumstances that have made him go crazier or whatever. But he befriends him, and I think that him befriending the patient is seen by colleagues of his as a sign of his own insanity, which leads to the ending where the doctor himself becomes a patient in the hospital that he used to work in. Yeah, surprisingly, there's less, because obviously I was aware of the general flow of the book when I was researching and like what when I was looking up books to read and what to kind of expect, but I thought there would be a lot more of a play on that transition, that like power play, and in the book in itself as well, it kind of sets up a lot of the stakes, or not the stakes. It sets up the boundaries of who is able to do what. The patients are obviously not allowed to leave, and the people who are looking over the patients have very varying responsibilities, including beating them up and shit like that. So there's already this big emphasis on like where the power is, but it wasn't really about that in the end, which was quite surprising for me. To add to your point about the flow, something that I really thought was interesting in the beginning, and I don't know if you have any thoughts or observations on it, was the very first chapter, and this isn't repeated in any other part of the book, I don't think. It seems to be written from like a first person perspective. It's like it's written as if someone is kind of guiding you through, literally kind of by the hand, through the grounds to this hospital, even saying like, let us go down the narrow path leading to this outbuilding and see what's going on inside. Then later on, even in that chapter, describing this intelligent patient guy, it literally says, "I like his broad, high cheekboned face." This is, just words on. This is just the text itself. So we wonder, like, who is guiding this, or I don't know. It's kind of like an unsettling way to open the book, and it doesn't reference it at any point elsewhere.
I don't know if it was only the first chapter, but there were some points where the narrator refers to himself as I, and this made me immediately think of other Russian literature, kind of like Dostoevsky type stuff and Crime and Punishment. And really, now I had this like half-baked theory midway through. Let me know what you think.
Nice. Let's hear it.
I felt like this is from the somewhat little exposure that we have had, however. I feel like in this kind of classical Russian literature, it's very common for most of the text to be the characters speaking their kind of inner voices, but also at some point a narrator that is not the objective omniscient one, but is kind of like a spectator, almost like fourth wall breaking, like leading you, the leader, through these characters and what they feel. Whereas I guess my easiest reference would be German literature. I think there is more a focus on a more omniscient narrator and more descriptions of the scene and objects and the environment. And, just kind of, we're going in this house and the house looks like this and it has a long roof and blah, 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 blah. Whereas in the Russian text, we mostly see this through the characters, if at all. And yeah, I wonder if that means anything, or if that's like a thing that other people also feel is valid. Like that, there's almost no objective descriptions of like the reality. I feel like the objects and the environment in these texts.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I also, yeah, like I wouldn't say I'm nearly what's the word, familiar enough with like Russian literature to say, but I would like to agree with you.
If you think back on Goethe and maybe even also Kafka, I feel like there is much more an emphasis on a kind of impersonal, distant description of the scene where we are and how we got there and how the hallways look and the smell of it and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. I'd say with Kafka it probably shifts a little bit, but I know what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, even when I think about like, obviously movies are different, but with Andrei Tarkovsky, like Stalker, we've both seen Stalker, like there is something like quite undeniably, there's something very connected between what we see and the state of the characters. Not in like a kind of like over like this character is in distress, therefore it's like raining and there's lightning or whatever, but more like, I don't know, something like a bit more subliminal.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because a lot of these Russian texts have an element or theme of insanity. Also in Crime and Punishment and in what was it, The Underground Man? What was the story called? Notes from the Underground.
Yeah,
like there is it's the kind of character's insanity or questioning whether he is insane or whether he's normal kind of warps how we read the whole story. And even though Kafka does the same, right, in the trial, where the kind of actually not really. I mean, he's not questioning his sanity that much. It's much more like I am correct and the outside world is fucked. That's more the trial, right? So I feel like
I think the trial is always like you as the reader, you don't have that much of a qualm with what the protagonist is doing necessarily, or rather you like sympathize with his struggle rather than like purely observing his response to things, right? It's less about his peculiar response to things and more about the peculiar world itself, I guess, right?
It's more, I feel like there's
Although
more...
there are peculiarities about how he behaves.
Yeah, but the focus is more on the external, I feel like. And then
I agree.
With the Russian ones, it's a lot of inner reflection. And even though there is very similar themes, I guess, in how the characters are often powerless or completely resigned to what's happening to them, I thought this was very poignant. Is that a word? I don't know. In when the doctor gets arrested, or well, not arrested, but he gets put into the mental institution himself. There's really no struggle at all in his being assigned there, and kind of similar to Joseph K., I feel like, in the trial. But the way we are led through this process was different.
Right. I think it's like a violence which is committed without violence, if that makes sense. Like there's some kind of like he's not imprisoned there. He's just brought there to the room, and then this other doctor is like, "Oh, just wait here for a minute," and then the doctor never comes back, and then he tries to leave. And then he realizes he can't leave. Yeah,
that's where the violence comes in, right? The author makes
it
clear, like, no, now you get the punches as well if you try to leave.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Should we talk about Stoicism? I feel like we need to get this out of the way.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So there is a big theme of this also. Okay, so a little background. So Chekhov himself was a medical doctor who, in his free time, however, was very devoted to writing and philosophy and all this. And we clearly see this element reflected in the main character, the doctor, as we call him. And in the story, the doctor kind of realizes that the hospital is shit and he's really a complete scammer because he isn't helping the patients at all. And he kind of reconciles this by saying, well, we all die in the end. And like, what the fuck does it matter if I like help a peasant or two? And like, this hospital is so fucked and they all steal from them and they beat them in the wards. Like, what can I do? I'm just one doctor, even though he is the head doctor. So really he could probably change a lot of this if he wanted to. But he kind of writes it off. And now Stoics, when they hear this, would get triggered. But I think to take like the least charitable view on Stoicism, you could say his Stoic approach to life kind of leads him to be indifferent to the suffering, which is kind of the point of Stoicism, right? Is kind of to be indifferent to like, even if you suffer. Like you can't, if like whatever, you just suffer through it. Don't revel in it. Don't whine about it. And now Stoics would say, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't act or whatever. But yeah, this doctor, what he does is he completely takes that as an excuse not to do anything and just to kind of rest on his easy life. But even pity himself in that, like, oh, my life sucks because I can't change anything, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think also the difference between his stoicism and I think what I think seems to be kind of more of a typical understanding of stoicism is he projects his stoicism on other people. And I don't think that's part of the Stoicist philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So he looks on, these thousands of patients that he sees who are getting no better. And like you said earlier, he says, oh, well, there's no difference between death and life. Or we're all going to die anyway, so what's the point in giving them 5 or 10 years extra? And, when he's speaking to the intelligent patient, Gromov, he is speaking in this very condescending tone, basically saying, this cold cell it's no different to a nice study that you could have. And in reality, he's talking about his own study, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I quite like this, like, mirroring as well between the intelligent patient and the doctor. And we do, like you said, we do get like a little bit of background on Gromov, the intelligent patient, in like one of the early chapters of the book, where we think that, oh, this story is going to be about him. And we learn that he's had pretty much like a pretty normal life. Like it's not even really super clear why he ended up getting stuck in this hospital. But he's also like a fervent reader in the same way that the doctor is, and engaged in philosophy and likes to talk about these things clearly. So I do like that. As just a kind of side note, I like the way that there are these kind of rhymes or patterns in the book itself.
Yeah. On the point of Ivan, you see, we said we're gonna call him Ivan, and now you said Gromov.
Sorry, no, you said intelligent patient. Okay, we can stick with Ivan.
So Gromov. So the intelligent patient, Ivan Gromov III, he came from privilege, which kind of similar to the doctor, right? But different to the doctor, he kind of fell from privilege through no fault of his own. And I think actually it was mentioned that like his father or something, or his grandfather got arrested. I think his father got arrested for some financial issues, and then they went basically bankrupt, which when I looked up stuff about Chekhov, I think it said that his I hope I'm not confusing things now, that his father also made, like, they like renovated their house, which then they didn't have enough money for, and went into, I think he almost went into debtor's prison or something. And so yeah, he clearly puts a lot of elements of his own life into various characters here, or these two characters really. And yeah, so the intelligent patient, Gromov Ivan III, he fell from privilege pretty early, and he comes to this kind of anti-stoic perspective of, you say that true happiness comes from within and all this shit, but really when you're here rotting in the prison and all you get is this shit food and everything is dirty and smells like, God made us out of flesh, and he gave us senses, and so who are you to tell me that I should just go into this mind palace and eat grapes in my mind when the reality that was given to me is horrible, and isn't this sensory aspect that overwhelms the mind. And the doctor, when he visits him in his cell, I'm just gonna call it a cell instead of a ward. He kind of says, no, this is, it doesn't really matter, as you said, whether you're in a nice study or in this filthy place. True happiness comes from within, and Diogenes and the Stoics, and Diogenes lived in a barrel. And I think there's a really great quote we can read at this point.
Yeah. Let me grab it up.
So Ivan's response is, you should go and preach that.
Go and preach.
Oh,
right.
You go ahead.
I can read it for you if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to read it? You should go and preach that philosophy in Greece, where it's warm and fragrant with the scent of pomegranates. But here it is not suited to the climate. With whom was it I was talking of, Diogenes? Was it with you? Yes, with me yesterday. Diogenes did not need a study or a warm habitation. It's hot there without. You can lie in your tub and eat oranges and olives, but bring him to Russia to live. He'll be begging to be let indoors in May, let alone December. He'll be doubled up with the cold.
I think this is such a great point, not on the climate, obviously, specifically, but just overall, I think, and maybe you're similar in this, I think I'm just going to talk about myself. And then you can tell me what you think. So I have a very positive, relatable response to all the existentialist texts, and I feel like they're really dealing with the philosophical problems that concern us today in a very well-reasoned manner. And even though they're kind of these eternal problems of why shouldn't I just kill myself, or what's the meaning of life, etc., what to do in the face of suffering, I feel like the existentialists, partly due to the kind of political and societal circumstance that they're writing in, with, the Great Wars and all that, or the foreshadowing of that, it kind of matters to us today still. I completely can never relate to the Greeks, and I have never really been interested in reading the Greeks much. I know people always fawn over the Greeks, and I know the existentialists build on the Greeks, obviously. They're always referenced a lot. But whenever I read the Greeks, I just find it so just abstract and unrelatable, and I was like, even though they're discussing very similar things, I just always feel like, well, yeah, but I feel like it's different now, or it doesn't really matter. And this passage specifically just jumped out at me and explained to me why I don't feel so interested in the Greek text, because I feel like, he talks about the climate here, but I think really the point is like, in the face of the big ideologies of the 20th century, socialism, fascism, the world wars, and then, stuff that we have today with the technology and everything, it's, reading about Diogenes in a barrel eating grapes is like, sure, who even knows? Like,
it kind of reminds me of Jung talking about not. I don't think he was talking directly about meditation, but kind of talking about that inward-looking practice and like, using that to deal with pain, psychological pain or whatever, and maybe to an extent that can work and that can be helpful, but like if someone's driving a screw through a toenail, I don't know if a meditation's gonna necessarily absolve you.
Yeah. And another point is, and this is almost like a critical theory point. I wouldn't quite ascribe it to them, but another point is this perspective of privilege, right? Even when we're talking about the Greeks, we're mostly talking about kind of comments in my writing like, no, but this guy was like very poor. No, but we're mostly talking about like upper class, like philosophical elites, and kind of referencing this with the warm climate, and even if you're homeless, it's not that bad, and I don't know, you could just go to the orgy later.
I mean, that's like Greece today, right?
Yeah.
So if you can have a huge financial crash, we lose all the banks, but we're still here.
Feta cheese. Is that Greek? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it is.
Yeah, so I feel like when people say the Greeks are timeless and this inward thinking, it doesn't matter what kind of technology or environment you're in, you can always get through something through inward thinking and Stoicism practice. Like I do feel like that's actually not true. And if you're like, depending like how your experience and your upbringing was, like sure, agency, that's a good point. Like, and to some point, the Stoics, I guess, what part of what they're describing is agency, right? This very like simple conservative idea of, well, instead of blaming everything on the external, if you take some responsibility and agency, you can actually do something within that. Not saying that, pull up bootstraps, blah, you can become a millionaire if you're a slave. But, there is something positive in discovering your own agency. However, as you said, this, like, if you lived in abject poverty your whole life, and like now someone came with a boat, enslaved you and put you in another country and put you to work, like you're not going to read the meditations, be like, now I know how to be happy. Like this just not going to happen.
Well, I think the reason, we really should actually read some Stoicism, because we kind of talk about it without really having like dug super deep into the texts. And by all means, if people have criticisms, definitely air them out.
Yeah, and tell us what specifically we should, like, where are the good, like, we know, meditations, blah blah, but tell us like, this is the part which is great.
I think the kind of not necessarily, not to like go too deep into just Stoicism, because we want to kind of stay with the book, but I do think this, defining, as you said, defining your own agency and establishing what can possibly be changed versus what cannot possibly be changed, is like helpful. What you can possibly act on and what you can't. But it is also kind of, it's not like a moral system, I don't think, and it doesn't really give you any, doesn't allow you to really understand the situation that you live in. It doesn't really help you to understand or critique the systems that make things impossible for you to change. So, like in my understanding, a Stoic will cut off that thinking before they even get to it, because it's like, I have a very recent example. I had to renew my driving license, and I was like so annoyed. Firstly, because I got fucking basically, not to go too deep into it, basically entrapped like last year into like a parking fine, into a driving fine, for like turning somewhere I wasn't allowed to turn, and I got points on my license, and that meant that even though I was only a couple months away from getting this gold license, which would allow me to renew it really easily, I was now like, I was like
You have a filth license now.
I have a filth license, which means that when I renew, I have to go to the fucking office, the place, which takes an hour to get to. I have to go through all the fucking stages, take a photo, do all this bullshit, and then have to sit through this like mandatory hour-long lecture about driving safety, where they tell you a story about some kid that got hit by a bus or like a truck. And it's like a whole day, basically. You just have to waste a whole day like going to this place and then spend money to get the thing renewed. And, it's like just generally frustrated by like the fact that this has to be done and there's no other way of making it any easier. The fact that you're kind of treated almost as a suspect or a criminal for just having a small traffic violation, and I feel like a stoic would probably be like, there's nothing you can do about this, so just don't get upset about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it's like very hard for me not to get upset about that. And if you have a whole country of people that are stoics in this case, then what good are you actually doing for the world?
Right.
Like, you're just validating these systems.
Right.
Whereas people who actually get angry about it and actually have an emotional response to these things and actually like recognize that there are, that actually you kind of have to be unsettled by things constantly in order to push towards changes. I feel that's where stoicism might fall short.
I think we've talked about this point before in the Camus episode. I think the main point about stoicism that you get when you look it up online is like, don't get angry if you can't change anything. Kind of like stoicism in a nutshell. But then again, like, especially when you talk on a, I'm going to use the bad C word, collective level, there are almost no things that are out of our agency as humans, right? I mean, even the weather. It turns out.
Does it? Oh,
are you gonna say Israel? No, even the weather with geoengineering. I know Nick has a couple of biases, so I just had to. But like there's and somewhere in this story actually there was another great quote where he says like, contemplating the existence of God and immortality, and I think they're like paraphrasing a Dostoevsky quote about even if God doesn't exist, you can be pretty damn sure that humanity would invent him at some point. So basically he does exist for all intents and purposes, which is kind of the ultimate anti-stoic.
That's great.
There was another kind of quote on this topic while we're at it, starts with comprehension. Could you read that one?
Of course. Comprehension, repeated Ivan Dmitryich, frowning. External, internal. Excuse me, but I don't understand it. I only know, he said, getting up and looking angrily at the doctor. I only know that God has created me of warm blood and nerves. Yes, indeed. If organic tissue is capable of life, it must react to every stimulus. And I do. To pain I respond with tears and outcries. To baseness with indignation. To filth with loathing. To my mind, that is just what is called life. The lower the organism, the less sensitive it is, and the more feebly it responds or reacts to stimulus. And the higher it is, the more responsively and vigorously it reacts to reality. How is it you don't know that? A doctor, and not know such trifles, to despise suffering, to be always contented, and to be surprised at nothing, one must reach this condition. And Ivan Dmitrich pointed to the peasant who was a mass of fat, or to harden oneself by suffering to such a point that one loses all sensibility to it. That is, in other words, to cease to live. You must excuse me, I am not a sage or a philosopher, Ivan Dmitrich continued with irritation, and I don't understand anything about it. I am not capable of reasoning. Boom.
Boom. So this is kind of
That's a certified Book Boys quote, I think. Maybe we should have like a little wall of fame of quotes that we like.
Yeah. We'll do a 5-year review episode soon.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So now every Stoic hearing this will be like, no, this is not real Stoicism. He's making a Stoic straw man, blah blah blah. But whatever this ideology is that he is describing, we'll give the Stoics their point, and we'll call this strawman Stoicism. This strawman Stoicism, which even within Stoicism, you can be sure that some Stoics believe in this strawman Stoicism, right? Just shut yourself off to pain and, stone face, coldness. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of the ultimate critique of that. And in a way, it's kind of really a simple point. Like the armchair philosopher who is comfortable in his study, but when he gets confronted with actual reality, it all falls apart kind of thing. It's not a super novel idea, but I think the way he puts it is very convincing.
Yeah, I really like the lower the organism, the less sensitive, and the higher the organism, the more responsive it is.
Yeah, and
it is just kind of like this sort of baseline. You can't argue with it.
Yeah, if you wanted to attack this, and maybe now this would be kind of strawmanning Chekhov, but if you wanted to attack this, you would probably say something like, there is an invitation to a kind of nature fallacy in here, where you say, because we were created with this, because we have this, or because there's violence in nature, it is correct kind of thing, right? Like, because you have, I think we talked about this before with like sexual urges and kind of cheating and that kind of stuff in the Atlas Shrugged context. It's like, because if you have this by nature, then you should follow your kind of base instincts or whatever. And if you feel pain or anger or whatever, you should just act it out, because it's why else would you have this highly stimulant or sensitive to stimulus body, right? Why would God have given you this kind of thing? And so yeah, like if you take a wrong turn here, you could get to like this follow your base drives naturalism, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really give any final answers, and like, where you would find yourself sitting on the spectrum of like, acting on every instinct, every desire that comes towards you, or every feeling, and fully feeling everything versus trying to box yourself away from it, is something that neither of these philosophies really can like tell you. Another thing I'd say as well is maybe in the line of criticizing this, at least Ivan's point here is that, surely there is a limit to how much you would like to feel if all you feel is pain. And if you're in this like hellish hospital prison all day long, and if you're getting beaten up every day, I think that it's it's not difficult to understand why you would kind of want to shield yourself with some kind of stoic thinking. I think none of us have been in prison. Neither of us have been in serious danger in our lives. I don't think either of us have experienced extreme pain or extreme danger. But with that said, yeah, I think we've definitely both probably gone into things in our lives having to kind of like brace ourselves, and had to kind of like psychologically deal with stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a tricky one, but I think that yeah, insofar as we're talking about like trying to shield our senses from things, I think there is reason in that. And I think it is a kind of a human thing to do as well. I don't know if animals can do that. You know, and you are kind of like acting on some like, it is a rational thing to do. I think there's like some kind of meta thinking going on where you're like, I know I feel these ways and I need to protect myself.
It's another side of the coin of delaying instant gratification, I guess, right? With the animal comparison.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I stumbled upon an article saying that apparently Lenin is said to reference this story as his trigger for becoming a revolutionary.
Oh God.
Which is, I don't know if it's true. Well, let's entertain the idea. But I that would just be such a horrible irony of the world, you know, and also because I think that the Soviets are kind of infamous for committing a lot of their detractors to mental prisons. Like if you criticize socialism, well, you're clinically insane, so you should just go into into this ward.
Maybe that's what was inspiring for me.
Yeah, Lenin was like, this last part, like, I like this last part, very good. No, I think it was more in reference to the doctor being ignorant to suffering of the lower, or not necessarily lower classes, but other people, even if the suffering is right in his face and he deals with it every day for 20 years. And, you know, if you don't experience it yourself, you just don't get it. Which then you could, like, if you take that kind of leftist almost point to its extreme, we would get into this, like, who can say which word kind of thing. And, you know, can men comment on feminist writing and all this. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the word? It's like there's a term for this. I'm out of practice.
Nick, you're so privileged you don't even know the term. Disgusting.
I always had it in the barrel when I was ready to debate people in uni. I don't do that so much anymore. But it's basically this, you know, this epistemology where you are the only person that can
right.
You are the only person that can measure your own pain. You are the ultimate arbiter of what a slight is to you, etc. And that doesn't quite really make sense.
Interesting in the medical context of the story also. I mean, when talking about pain specifically, that's actually very true, right? You actually cannot measure pain in any scientific way, and it truly is a subjective thing. Like you can maybe detect some specific brain activity, but there's really no way of telling whether a patient is feeling pain or not and how much. So yeah, I think that's in the medical field, that's another issue that, you know, will not be solved probably ever. And, you know, that always comes up when prescriptions of painkillers and all that.
For sure. Yeah, as soon as you begin, you know, you say to someone, how does this hurt on a scale of 1 to 10? You know, people's responses to a 1 to 10 scale varies massively. And even, pain tolerance is not really like I don't think it's like a solid concept, is it? What else do we have to talk about this? Have you got any other points you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was just You reminded me of a Latin classic quote, which I think is. Wait, I was trying to look this up, but is it sanare divinum est? To heal is divine, or sometimes more translated for like doctors. This is like something that they get told in medical school, I think, like to take away pain is godlike. So really your role as a doctor, perhaps more so than curing the patient or like achieving some like objective measurable thing, is just if you can ease suffering, then that is kind of should really be your main focus. And there's always this debate about like doing a procedure, which, of course, it's better to take a little pain right now and then fix your leg in the long run. But, never forget that pain is subjective, and taking away pain itself should maybe be your main objective. Which I feel like is relevant because Chekhov was a doctor, and this story also deals with that. And our friend Yutaro is becoming a doctor now, so you better take away the pain, brother.
Congratulations, Yutaro.
The casual shout out. So there was another aspect, I think, which is interesting, which is this ex-military friend the doctor has. I think he's called Mikhail or something.
He's the postman.
Let's call him the postman. Yeah. So it's this ex-military guy who also kind of fell from grace a bit due to financial stuff, and now works at the post office. But he's like kind of this loud, rowdy guy, kind of jolly in a way, but quite annoying. Like he always like thinks he's correct, and he is kind of the center of attention. And
they describe him going on the train, and he like introduces himself to every single person on the carriage.
Yeah. And he brings about really the ruin of the doctor, and like financially, because he takes him on this trip that he really didn't want to go on, because he keeps insisting that the doctor is insane, like, or mentally unwell, which really he isn't. Or at least not more so than any of the other people in the story who are in the regular world.
Yeah.
And it's really this kind of intervention which brings him into a lot of trouble financially, and then ultimately gets him into the psych ward. And he never, and then, by the way, we didn't mention this, the doctor kills him. He doesn't kill himself, but he suffers now I looked up the word that they used, the something shock. I think it's basically just like it used to be like the go-to word for like a sudden death that you couldn't really explain. Like it might have been a stroke, or it could be like because he got beaten before, so he got brain bleeding or something, and then, or maybe he just died from like panic. But yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
Basically,
my translation describes it as a stroke, but it is also kind of, there are these different symptoms. Anyway, go on. Yeah,
and so it's really this military friend guy, the postman, who really has the most, I feel like, responsibility in bringing about the downfall and death of the doctor. Although you could say that the doctor's strawman stoic lifestyle kind of brought himself into that position as well. But and he really feels no resentment, it seems. I mean, he does during the trip, just because his friend is annoying, but there's no point in the story where he's like, the reason why I'm here is because of you, and curse you for doing this to me, which I thought was curious and interesting.
Yeah, and also as well, he lends him his last 500 rubles, basically.
For gambling debt.
Never gets it back. Yeah, for gambling debt.
And then they're like, how much money do you still have? 62 or 82 or something? No, I mean like in total for your whole savings and everything. He's like, 82. And he's like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, it is weird, like, but I guess at that point he's kind of just, he's he's given up. I don't know. Like, he doesn't really interact with anyone in any kind of meaningful way after that, I feel. It seems more like things happen around him once he gets back from Russia. Not from Russia. They are in Russia the whole time. From Moscow.
Well, so they went to Warsaw, which must have been in Poland still at the time. I mean, right? So they do go to Poland. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. But
okay. Yeah. True.
Yeah. And so one another aspect. Oh well. First of all, what do you think is the point of putting this postman in the story? What, like, is he supposed to represent a certain type of person or society or class, or like what is he?
Well, so I think firstly, as you said, like he's another character that's fallen from privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, all of the characters in the story. Unlike our intelligent patient, he doesn't get imprisoned even though he's fallen from privilege, and, you know, may as well could have easily found himself in similar circumstances. I think that's kind of a core part of the narrative here, is that part of the doctor's narrative is that this could happen to anyone being put in the prison hospital, right? So maybe he is supposed to indicate that, and, you know, in spite of him being like this apparent useless, you know, lazy, pretty shitty character, he's still free, whereas Ivan, the intellectual patient, who is kind of a bit weird and a bit kind of sickly, you know, he is, for whatever reason, you know, kept in this hospital. Maybe that's one of the reasons why.
And this made me think also about, like, not to go back to the Stoics too much, but, like, let's say this internal view of, you know, as internal happiness is true happiness, and you don't need materialistic things. You just need to be content with yourself. Because, you know, you always hear this, because at the end of the day, the things, they don't last forever, and then eventually they break, or they, you know, when you die, then they're just things, and who really cares if you have a lot of gold or not when you're at your deathbed, and all this kind of stuff, right? You've heard it a billion times. But that always makes me think, like, okay, but all these materialistic things, aren't they in a way realer than the thoughts in your head? Like, sure, I get if you're rich but truly unhappy and internally problematic, then sure, it's probably better to be poor and happy. But I feel like that's not really the discussion. The discussion is, if you're a materialist and kind of making money and spending it and having a nice car and whatever, if that really fulfills you, you might look at this and say, oh, he's a stupid materialist and he doesn't get it, because true happiness should come from within, and all that. But, you know, in the end, you die, and then your thoughts are gone, and as far as you're concerned, your car is also gone. But you know, it's not obvious to me that the internal happiness is necessarily, like, superior or more real than the external materialistic happiness.
Yeah, and I guess also as well, like, they're not necessarily dichotomy, right? It's not necessarily that
yeah.
I don't think there's a reason why you can being a materialist makes you not internally happy or incapable of having internal happiness. And I know plenty of people that, and I feel maybe even the people that say this most are people that are both internally unhappy and externally unhappy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
well, I'm not going to fix the external part, so I might as well just subscribe to the internal is everything I need.
and believe that it's all fine.
Yeah.
yeah, and also as you say, like, you know, material is like a sign, can be a sign of accomplishment. Obviously, it's not always, and there are plenty of people that have material wealth that is not a sign of like personal accomplishment. But like if you work hard, then these things that you purchase are a kind of reminder to you of what you've done, or it's an enjoyment that you can have. And there's definitely satisfaction in having earned that yourself, or excluding whatever kind of privilege you would have had in the first place that would have given you a step up over other people, or whatever. The fact is that you've still chosen to do it.
Yeah, so the reason why I brought this up is because at the end of the story, you look at all these characters and, you kind of ask yourself, so if I had to be one of these, wouldn't I want to be the postman? Who's kind of, he lost money in gambling and he travels and he's kind of a very shallow, not intellectual type, but lives this more vigorous and rowdy life. But, not like as a peasant, but just like I guess the simple pleasures, you might say. He doesn't read, probably. But isn't he the happiest and has the best ending?
Yeah. Well, I think I would prefer to be the intelligent patient, because there's no difference between where I am right now and the cold cell.
Right.
As long as I have my books.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And again, it's kind of going back to this, like, I feel like there are parallels there with, there are some parallels with that, like kind of like, living on some base instinct, or living on some kind of, without thinking too deeply, which aligns kind of with this more like Zarathustrian sort of thing, which I think is criticized when our boy even goes off against Greek mythology, where it's kind of like, rally against the things that like upset you. There's something like very natural and unintellectual about it, right? It's just,
yeah. And there was a quote more toward the beginning, which I kind of think brings out the sentiment a bit. I think this is the impatient, the intelligent. The in stands for intelligent. He says, I may express myself cheaply. You may laugh. But the dawn of a new life is at hand. Truth and justice will triumph. And our turn will come. I shall not live to see it. I shall perish. But some people's great-grandsons will see it. I greet them with all my heart and rejoice with them. Onward. God be your help, friends. Now, essentially, he's just saying things will get better. So it's a very simple message. But I feel like the context in this kind of, imprisoned guy in this horrible Russian environment, and just also the fact that after that, before things got better, they got a lot worse with the communists. And it was, in fact, this struggle, this like trying to improve of the intellectual class, was brought about all this horror. But now in the end, you and me, we do really live this life that he is describing here, right? Like, we are the great grandsons who saw it. And maybe that's the point of being maybe that's what gives meaning to these intellectual sufferers here. It's like, yeah, maybe I'm not even going to see any of this, but the reason why I shouldn't live like the materialist postman is because, if enough of us intellectual types struggle towards something, we can bring about a much better world. Again, as I said, kind of historically, ironically, it got a lot worse in Russia before it got better. But yeah,
like, let's start with these filthy landowners.
Yeah,
an interesting
so
point. I hadn't thought of that.
That kind of made me think like, ooh, yeah, I am. Like, you just imagine like this guy, because sometimes you just read these texts on the internet as like, oh yeah, this is a text that exists, but like this was actually a guy in Russia, probably with very similar circumstances around him that he's writing, and he's writing this down on a piece of paper. Now here we are, these great grandsons living in this better world that he was describing 130 years ago. It's like, damn, kind of makes you think.
Yeah, for sure. Things are definitely better now. Russia still exists, but
well,
in spite of it all,
don't worry. The U.S. and everyone involved is trying to work on that.
Yeah, we've got our top minds.
Yeah,
top minds against
top
that
minds.
issue.
Don't worry. NATO is fully devoted to aggravating Russia.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right, cool.
I had one last narrative point or stylistic point I wanted to ask you about. So I've had this discussion recently with my wife. I almost said girlfriend. Oh, close one there. About characters in literature. Like, I think it was specifically about Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. And we were talking about how in Atlas Shrugged, the characters are much more... They're kind of characters who are single ideas. And these characters are supposed to live out this idea, and then they're kind of used as pawns in battle. Like, this guy is this idea, and this guy is this idea, and now we make them battle and see which is the best idea, kind of thing. And in The Fountainhead, it's a bit less that, although Rourke is clearly that, but some of the other characters aren't as... Like, there's more depth to them. They're not just an idea. They're more real people. And we were talking about whether this is good or bad writing. And the more I think about it, I feel like it kind of depends on the execution. Like, you can't really say if this is good or bad writing. But, these Russian guys, they do this a lot, right? Also Dostoevsky, where they have... they have an idea that they want to put into conflict with another idea, so they invent a character to carry this idea, right?
Yeah. There's the wizard and the knight.
Nick is part of a club that's
the drunken...
what is it, the K something? I don't know. I can't remember. So he talks about wizards and knights. I don't know what he's referring to, but
I'm not in the KKK, okay?
Oh, and I never said that, but
God damn it.
No, we're just joking here, but I just made it worse.
What's your fucking point?
To aggravate you, my friend. That is my point. No,
yeah.
No, so yeah, the Russians do this a lot, and they do this really well. They do it in a way where it makes me think like inventing characters who are single ideas in a way and making them battle is good writing. But then sometimes you read something else, and with Atlas Shrugged, I was kind of feeling like Atlas Shrugged is the more maybe it's a better book in the sense that it deals with more real ideas that matter to us. But The Fountainhead is the better book in the way that the characters are more real people, and their conflict in the way they deal with these ideas is more realistic, and they're not just one dimensional in a sense. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on this?
Haven't really thought about the difference between the two, Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead, but I do think that the Fountainhead 2 does that same thing quite strongly, to be honest, of like having these archetype characters, like with Ellsworth Toohey.
For sure, him, yeah.
He's like, so clearly who he is.
Yeah, I mean Toohey, Keating, and Rourke for sure, but maybe less
maybe outside of that.
Yeah, less on Shrugged versus The Fountainhead. More so, I meant like, do do you have any idea about whether like inventing a character simply to carry an idea and like carrying this idea into battle, is that a good character? Is that a well-written character, or should it be that characters shouldn't just be carrying an idea and they should be more like deep, complex human beings that are torn between ideas? Or
I really don't think there's any correct answer.
Yeah.
I think like you can find good literature that does both. What is good literature is like something you'll only know by like reading a book that you like, and I don't think you definitely can't create rules as to like what creates good literature or not.
So let me steelman the okay. Let me steelman let me steelman the aggressive case in saying that I think that we often bring this up, but what we hate about a lot of kind of Marvel stuff and just contemporary and what a lot of people feel is an issue with a lot of modern movies and stories is that you have like the bad guy and the good guy, and they're like clearly they're just like this idea, and there's nothing to the character. Like they're completely flat characters, and they are really just there to carry this idea, and it's so obvious that they were invented for this purpose, and that's why they're bad characters. But then when you read the Russians, you feel the same thing. You feel like, oh, these characters, they're just this idea. They were clearly invented to carry this idea into battle, and that's why we're here. And that's what's so great about them, you know?
I think at least to talk about just what you just said, the good guy versus the bad guy, that's very different to, this character embodies stoicism, this character embodies some virile humanityism or whatever, it's... Yeah, and I think the Russians do that.
The Marvel one is much more flat, yeah.
Yeah, the Marvel one is
it's just good
more or less
bad.
like propagandistic.
Yeah,
right? Like it's it's like we have this like unsanctioned world police, universe police, blah 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 blah. Whatever.
Yeah, but not just with. I think even when you're not talking about just good and bad itself, you have some movies or books where you like find characters that are so obviously and painfully just there to represent like one specific idea. And it's like infuriating how obvious it is and how flat it makes the character. I can't like think of a specific example right now, but
yeah, I honestly find it kind of hard to think of a specific example.
But yeah,
although I don't, yeah,
I'm just trying to put my finger on what it is exactly that makes this an infuriating trope versus like a great execution like the Russians do it. Is it just the ideas themselves have to be put into an interesting struggle? Is that it? Or is it more about the stylistic writing of the characters and how to, like, if you dress them up human enough, then it works? Like, what is it?
There's definitely more humanity you can give to characters. And I think the more expertly you're able to kind of sew together this philosophy with this character and like make them embody that, the better. Or not necessarily the better, but I wouldn't want to say the better, but maybe it allows you to kind of float these ideas in a way that is less obvious, less like stand out.
Okay, so
I think at the end of it, like they kind of always do stand out. It's normally like pretty obvious, regardless.
So let me still case this scenario then. So let's say we're making a movie about the modern kind of gender struggle thing, and so one character is basically Andrew Tate, and another character is like kind of super feminist, and would you say that dressing up these characters stylistically as human as possible, and like if you just give enough scenes of their internal thoughts and their upbringing and their backstory, will that result then in them being like interesting carriers of these two ideas and, you know, make them good characters? Or is it that the ideas themselves are like, if they're just too low quality or uninteresting, like it's not going to work?
As in, if the ideas are too low quality and uninteresting?
Yeah,
or...
yeah. Like, is it the stylistic dressing up of the characters that makes them would make for an interesting movie or story, or do the ideas themselves have to be interesting and you know, locked into a interesting struggle, and it doesn't really matter how you dress them up?
Yeah, I think both have to be probably good. I think it probably helps that both are good. I mean, for me personally, like, I would probably prefer. I mean, but then again, I mean, this is also my preference as well. I think for me, I like it when both are done well. I would probably edge more towards something that has substance over just the aesthetic quality. But I mean, yeah, when it does both well, that's like exceptional. I told you recently about this movie series called Decalogue, just written by this, directed by this Polish director Kieslowski. And I've only watched the first movie, but it's a big recommendation, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it's like a very, very, very simple theme, and you know, it's basically about science and materialism and material rationalism versus faith in God, and there are basically only two or three characters that are central to it, and they all embody very obviously different roles, and but it's also beautifully grounded, and it feels very real. And I was reading the notes of the director in the there's a book that has the script, and there's a kind of forward introduction, and it kind of talks a lot about how he wanted it to feel like as if you're just kind of plucking random people off the street and observing the drama in their lives. And it comes across very well, but it also has this like very, very stable, like solid philosophical debate within it. And it feels very Russian too, you know, like that feels like something that Tarkovsky would deal with in his movies too. It's not really so much about like having a pithy concept or like, you know, and also like economic dialogue or economic use of like film doesn't really care about any of that. It's just like create this tone and like this feeling and have this like ambient philosophical journey conversation happening throughout. I really like that about those people.
So would you say the characters in that are more portraying an idea and are more simpler characters, or are they more complex characters and less identifiable with a specific idea?
If we're talking about Decalogue, it's probably like the most. It's like probably the most intensely I've seen characters embody a philosophical idea whilst also having really, really enjoyed it. If that makes sense. But I would also say that they are very well grounded characters too, and there's kind of enough in the writing to and enough in the context as well, and just, you know, it's set in the 90s, well, it's written in the 90s, it's in Poland, which is obviously a Catholic country primarily, and so there's obviously this big, you know, religious backdrop to begin with. You have one character which is a strong rationalist, you have one character which believes in religion, and there I think there is enough given through to kind of explain, just to make it feel like this is actually something that people that could exist. But it's dramatized as well. But I think it's okay to be dramatized. Like, they are we are talking about like literature and movies, and realism is only one kind of subgenre within that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and to pursue like realism for the sake of realism is not necessarily,
it would be boring as fuck.
I don't think necessarily a goal.
So okay, we got a little off from the story, but I think once you kind of, it's one of those things that you can't unsee once you start thinking about, like, is like whatever you're watching or reading, like recently I always find myself thinking, like, is he, like, am I supposed to swallow this character just as an idea, or is this like a real character, and like, is it well executed or not? Okay, good. Any closing thoughts?
Cool.
Did you were you convinced, Nick, that Stoicism is gay by Anton Chekhov?
I think the jury is out on that one. No, I think we should give Stoicism a fair trial. I think we should definitely visit it at some point. I think I probably said this before as well, last time we chat on Stoicism.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter to the Stoics whether the trial is fair or not, because it's kind of really, once you're in the Joseph K situation, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly. And what are the Stoics gonna do? Are they gonna get angry about the opinion of some guy on the internet? I think you should revisit the text, buddy. Revisit the text, buddy.
Take that, Stoics. It reminds me of that South Park moment with the little guy, and he's like, "Bullets are words that words are bullets, but they can't hurt me." And then, do you know that?
No. Is it Ike?
No. It's like Cartman is laughing about this little guy, and he came to the school like, "Oh, your words can't hurt me," and then, like, as he provokes him more, he just completely loses his shit. So take that, Stoics.
Stoics rage in the comments.
When someone calls you a midget, then can you really stay calm, dear Stoics?
Exactly. Someone calls you a short king.
And with that, dear listeners,
I had something else to say, but we've just gone off on the tangent. I've forgotten what I was going to say. Well, I was just going to say, this is worth reading for sure.
Yes. Very good recommendation. Yes. I'm glad we did this.
I also, as a note, read another of his stories, and now that I think about it, I think there are actually quite a lot of parallels. It's a story called The Grasshopper, which is kind of about a woman and her relationship with her husband and various men in her life. There's definitely a kind of like Chekhov thing. I feel there's something going on. There's some kind of like thread that connects his work, and maybe as we go on, we can kind of like revisit him and try and think a bit more about what makes Chekhov. That is all. Thank you for listening. Catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.